Zucchini Parmesan is on the menu for tonight, and I'm gonna show you how to make the best one. You've heard of eggplant Parmesan, you've heard of lasagna. This is the convergence of the two with layers of zucchini, cheese, soppressata, beautiful sauce, all into an amazing hot dish that I think you're gonna see why is one of my favorite comfort foods. Let's make it. You've probably heard of eggplant Parmesan, but we can do the same idea with zucchini. Because guess what? Zucchini is one that's super plentiful. It's always economical, even if you're not growing it. Going to the grocery store and getting zucchini when it's in season, really good way to have a low-cost meal. And this is such a fun way to use it because it has so much flavor. It is the essence of what you want. And honestly, if you're confused on what eggplant parm or zucchini parm is, and you're from the Midwest, think of it as a casserole, as a hot dish. And that's really what we're doing here. And we're just gonna use it in a new way. And that's what I love to do. So what I'm starting by is getting my zucchini ready because I do like to pre-roast them. And that means cutting them up and putting them in nice pieces. So to do that, what I'm doing is taking my zucchini. Now I grow my own, so I pick it when I want to, usually around 6 to 8 inches long. I think that size is nice because then it has not too big of seeds inside. If you let it get too much bigger, it does. So to me, for this recipe, you wanna use more on the medium size to smaller ones. Now I'm cutting them in half first, crossways, because it's easier to work with. Then cutting them in about, I'm gonna say it's probably roughly 1/4 to 1/2 inch slices. And on this bigger end here, like when they get bigger, kind of fatter at the bottom, you might do one more slice and then more on the narrow neck, one less. What we're doing is we're making planks really. And then this is what we're gonna roast. So you could also think of it almost as a really quick vegetable lasagna, but it's not really. I just think this is fun to find ways that add a lot of flavor, that are easy to do, but maybe incorporate something new that you haven't had, because with zucchini, we often only have baked goods. We have goods that we just make into bread, to cake, maybe a zucchini fritter once in a while, but this is something that's a little bit more special. So what I'm doing is laying them out, and now what I wanna do is take olive oil, and I wanna make sure I start just drizzling it on. Now I'm drizzling it on, but then what I wanna do is go get a pastry brush, and I actually wanna make sure I brush them, because as you're noticing at the moment, it's very irregular. And so I don't want it to be irregular, I want it to be very something that just is able to coat everything. So I'm grabbing my pastry brush, and I'm gonna go through here and just lightly quick, make sure I get all the surface area done. Now, just like eggplant, zucchini is like a sponge. It soaks in. So you can see here right when I drizzled it on, see how it just wanted to soak in even deeper before I brushed it? So that's why I want to quickly go through and brush it so it doesn't just soak into those one spots. Now what we want to do is make sure we do salt. This is gonna make sure it really adds flavor right on the beginning. Seasoning every step of the way when you're making anything, super important. And we're using kosher salt, and the reason I always in my recipes dictate what type of salt, as in kosher, for this is because kosher salt measures differently than, say, table salt, which is smaller, grained, and you don't need as much of table salt. So that's why I make sure to say I'm using kosher salt. You can use other salts, you just have to adjust. I'm of course then going to do a little bit of black pepper that I have some ground right here. I want to sprinkle that on. Again, we're just making sure we add flavor along the way. And that to me is what's important, is adding that flavor and getting it on here. And then one step that I'm gonna do, for this recipe, we're gonna go really weeknight quick. We're doing a pre-made red sauce. You can make a homemade one. I have a recipe with my eggplant Parmesan that works perfect for this, but since I'm using store-bought, I'm gonna add a little bit of red pepper flake because I like a little bit of spice. I think it's needed. But if you don't like spice, you'll leave this step off and that's no problem. I'm adding it so it can just be on there, and then when I assemble this dish together, we'll already have that little hint of spice. And that to me, I mean, I actually like a lot of spice, but for me, that just like wakes everything up. It's just good. So now that these are done, we're gonna put them in the oven, high heat. We're gonna let them roast until they start browning and cooking, and then we can just put everything together. I took these out of the oven, so what you can see is they start browning. Now what we're doing, if you have not made eggplant Parmesan before, or if you don't know what that is, oftentimes you go through a process of breading the pieces, frying them, and then assembling. I don't like to do that. One, is too much mess. Two, I don't think you need all that extra work. So what we're doing is browning them, crisping them slightly to get them to a great texture. And then we're going to now kind of do a deconstructed breading, where I'm not gonna really bread them, but I do have some panko breadcrumbs. I do have some Parmesan cheese, which, I mean, hello, we all know you want the good stuff. You wanna get an actual hunk, grate it, or buy grated. Don't get the the powdery, sawdusty stuff. That's not the same. So what we want to do though is going to add this breading layer of flavor while we're assembling. So I have some butter here that's been melting, and you can see it's just about done. And what I'm going to do is add in all of my breadcrumbs and that Parmesan cheese, and I'm going to let them soak in and add a little bit of salt, because again, we're seasoning along the way, remember? So we're adding in some seasoning and adding in some dried Italian seasoning, a pantry staple if you ask me, which has a blend of parsley, of basil, some thyme, oregano. What we're gonna do is just let these brown up, and then this is gonna be a layer we sprinkle on as we're assembling it in the casserole dish. It's really that simple. This was just browning. You can see I like to get it some color, just that nice golden brown, and always take it off a little before you think it's done, because your residual heat in that skillet, or pour it out right away, is gonna keep browning it just slightly. But isn't this pretty? And so much easier than breading each piece, and you don't get as much breading in the end, which is nice too. We don't need all that breading. So what we're gonna do now is assembly, which is really pretty simple. It takes a couple steps to actually do, but it's honestly one of those things that is kind of a fun process. So I'm gonna start with a little bit of my sauce. Now again, I'm using purchased sauce. If you wanna do a homemade sauce, search my website, wiseguy.com, for my eggplant parmesan recipe. Use that sauce, it's delicious. This is just a quicker way if you're looking for that. What I like to do is have a very thin layer of sauce always. If I do a lasagna, if I do something like this on the bottom, I think it just has a good separation, makes it easier to get out of the pan then too. So I just take it, shake it around to make sure we're kind of just coating that bottom lightly. You don't have to go too much here. And now we can just start going. So what I like to do for this is take and go by layers. Just start layering in the zucchini. Isn't this, I already am excited obviously, but I think this is just such a fun thing to do. And you know, one, I do not ever like hiding things for kids to eat, like my nieces and nephews. I don't hide food for them to eat, but I like to present it in different ways that might kind of gravitate and pull on their taste buds, be something that they didn't realize they would like and do like, you know? So that's kind of what we're doing here, is we're presenting it in a way that is maybe different for people. Now look how perfectly this is working out. Now remember, I am gonna give a slight range in my instructions for the amount of zucchini you need, 2 to 2.5 pounds, because it can vary. And I would always say go on the strong side, and you might have a few pieces left, but you wanna be able to have a whole layer in here. That to me is important. Now, what I'm gonna do next is take some cheese, mozzarella, and this is fresh mozzarella. So this is the kind you see if you're not used to buying it. It's those weird balls of cheese you can usually buy in the, if you're in the Midwest, I find it in the, what I call bougie cheese section of the grocery store. So the type where they try to make it look like it's really special cheese and it's all these expensive types. The mozzarella is in there. It's not super expensive, but it's one that isn't usually put by the normal dairy section of cheese. And so you then take those balls, you want the fresh, don't buy the pre-grated, and you wanna lay it on there because this is gonna be so melty, and I just kind of tear it, it tears very easily, into pieces and layer it all over. Like, does that not just look so good? Now I'm upping this a little bit, and I'm gonna add in some soppressata, some hot soppressata actually, that has a little bit of spice to it. You can use any type, but what I think this does is, again, kind of just make it something a little bit more special, something a little bit more out of the ordinary. It's a great way to add a ton of flavor. Also, if you're not a meat eater, guess what? I always try to make so my recipes are somewhat easily adaptable. This one is one of those. You can just leave the soppressata out. This is just one layer that you can say, hey, I don't want it, don't have it, and that's fine. But what we're doing is, it's a cured, beautiful meat. And for me, I always say my recipes are created from the grocery stores I can get to in rural areas. And if I can find this, I think anyone can. And it's usually beside these nicer cheeses in a grocery store. So what I'm doing is layering it in there. So kind of get the idea of that lasagna effect almost. And now what I want to do is take some of these beautiful Parmesan breadcrumbs and layer them on. Again, so much easier than any type of breading that we would have had to do individually. It's just a nice kind of thin layer. It will soak into the sauce on this layer, but still have that impact of texture, of flavor. And now we can layer on the sauce. So I'm gonna take half of my sauce that I have here and just layer it on over it. And this is, again, the same kind of process as like an eggplant Parmesan would be. We're just layering it on. And since we have already taken the time to make sure our zucchini has lots of flavor, because we pre-roasted it, so we're also not gonna have all that water content in there. Instead, what we're gonna have is all this beautiful sauce that has so much flavor. And a lot of times I'll use my home canned sauce. I love to can my own red sauce. And to me, that's such a great way to use it. But this is where you can use any of your favorite sauce. So now I'm just gonna repeat these layers, starting with the zucchini. We're gonna go to cheese. We're gonna finish, we're gonna put it together, we'll put it in the oven, but I'll show you here. So I'm just gonna repeat and then we'll be done. I'm ending with a breadcrumb layer right on top, just because I think that will look nice when it's actually baking and going through the oven process here. And I see a few more of these crumbs. Guys, I like to get them all out. I don't like to waste them. Once you go through making them, you want to use them all. And then I have a little bit more Parmesan cheese that I like to make sure I put on top too. It's like that last final seasoning layer. That's just gonna add so much flavor. So the zucchini was obviously roasted. It's somewhat cooked. The sauce is obviously cooked. The soppressata is cured. So we're really just warming this and heating it and baking it all the way through. It doesn't take as long since everything's already at that warm temperature, which is nice. So I'm gonna put this in the oven. We're gonna let it bake. Then we get to eat it. You can see how beautiful it is when it comes out of the oven. It was bubbling all around. That's how you know it's getting done. And then you can see it's just beautiful golden on top. You have that Parmesan cheese that crisped up. You have the breadcrumbs that add texture. So you of course want to let it sit for a few minutes just because 1, you will never feel your mouth for like the next 5 hours if you don't. 2, you just want to let it kind of firm up a bit, just a little bit. You want to serve it hot, obviously. Now, what's great about this is we can just go in then, cut it, serve it. This is one that it might sometimes be easier just to spoon it out into pieces too. I will always be a glutton for punishment and try to nicely cut a piece. It may not. And it doesn't really matter if it does or doesn't. But what I can tell you is the house is filled with such an amazing smell. And I wish you could all be here to enjoy it. But I'll just have to tell you, you'll just have to believe me, it really does smell so good. But look at these, look at that cheese. Can we talk about that? Is that not a good thing? This is just a thing of beauty. And it's comfort food, but it's also just good food. You know what I mean? It's that wonderful mix. And this is what I like. It's not that it has too much water in it. Having it roast the zucchini beforehand, it helps some of that because it brings out some of that extra liquid because it has a lot of water content in it. So then you can just serve it up. Need I say more? It's ready to go. Look at that cheese. Look at that cheese. That's exactly what you want. No matter how many times I make this, the current time I make it is my favorite. This is so good. What I love about it is you're getting layers of flavor. You've beautifully cooked zucchini that was roasted, and it isn't cloyingly heavy with all that breading. Instead, we have just a few layers of breading that really add, especially on top, that texture you want without having too much. It has beautiful amount of cheese in it. That sauce is rich and delicious. You can make a homemade one and have it be rich and delicious too. And it has the melty cheese that just makes us happy and feels like we're getting wrapped in a hug. That's what this is. This is like the end of summer precursor to the comfort food that's to come, but with summer produce. What could be better about that? So what do I hope you do with this? I hope you share this video around, because when you share these videos, of course it helps me, but it helps everyone else see that if I can do this here at my farm in Iowa, you can do this too. Also, it helps others hopefully have inspiration to try something new, bring people together, whether it's family, friends, new acquaintances, make something delicious. You do not have to make a fancy meal for your guests. You have to make something that makes them happy, and guess what? This does that. So share it around, check my website, wiseguy.com for this recipe and all my other recipes. Until next time, enjoy some good food.